have you caught some of the latest stuff as of late? You know, you've been able to catch the Raws on Netflix as of late?
I've been locked out, to be honest with you.
I thought I sent it to I gotta send it to you for sure. Because there should be no reason for that.
But, I mean, kind of indifferent to it at this point, to be honest.
Don't worry about it. We're gonna get all this conversation out as we are back. And with that said, guys, the Brawl's gonna start in 30.
And we're singing and we're colored. Give me a high five.
All right, cut and print. Beautiful, guys. Dynamite.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Welcome to our first episode in about a month. Welcome to the broadcast, episode 172, entitled "Are We There Yet?" It's been a while since we've been on the air. We're gonna get to that in terms of the vibe check and everything, but with that said, we're back, man. I'm your host and moderator, People Champion, aka Shahbiz Ronnie. And to my right is my partner today, Soft Force, aka Kid Ty. As his title today is Working on It. Guys, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/@TheBackstageBrawl. You can find us on Facebook, where we're streaming currently at The Backstage Brawl, and on Twitter, _Brawl, as we are streaming live right now. With that said, man, let's get to this vibe check, man. Ty, outside of today, how's it been for the last couple of weeks, man? Because we haven't been on for quite some time.
What's a good word for it? Don't have a good word for it. Hold on. My bad, interruption. What do you call it?
No, it's all good.
It's been a stuck, I guess has kind of been the word. Not going to dwell on it naturally, but past couple of weeks have been pretty repetitive in terms of the things that are annoying. But I it is what it is. It's not going to be happy all the time. Bright side of today has been as I've been going through the multiple different watch lists and watch laters of content, I have re-stumbled across a Spectacular Spider-Man. And yes, I'm watching it properly for the first time. I know some people are going to bring the pitchforks out and kill me, but I'll explain. When I was a kid, I only had select memories of the show, and I wanted to make good on the show because it's been praised for years for a reason. So I wanted to rewatch it with proper eyes now, with everything that I know. And I have been enjoying it very thoroughly, rewatching it back. I'm halfway through the entire series already, and I just started it today, so that gives you a good idea of where we're at with this.
I would ask you, if you ever get a chance to watch the new one with Domingo Coleman and the new stars of this new Spider-Man, you're going to like it. It gives you a little bit of that Spectacular Spider-Man feel. Even take apart the fact that Norman and Harry Osborn are black and with waves, or they're like us. It's a really good show.
I feel like that was a long time coming because we've been seeing those jokes for years with the original 90s Spider-Man. That was another reason why, as a kid, I think as a kid, because I grew up on the 90s Spider-Man, I had this front when Spectacular Spider-Man came out. I was like, oh, no, what is this? Wait, you can't do this. The 90s already did this. And then, but in the same token, I watched the original X-Men, and I had no problem watching X-Men Evolution. So it was definitely a me problem as a kid. So Hey,
No, it's not. I mean, to be honest, we were exposed with some good content as kids.
exposed. We were spoiled between the
Yeah,
90s and the 2000s.
we were exposed. Like, like I grew up with the Spider-Man the animated series. It took me a good minute to appreciate the genius that was Spider-Man Unlimited after, and then that helped me appreciate the Spectacular Spider-Man when that came out, and it made me realize there's been no bad Spider-Man animated series ever from the
Oh,
60s. No, listen, there might be ones that aren't great, but they've never been bad.
I don't know. I mean, the MTV one had good ideas, but it was shaky in places, and then there were some in the 2010s or the late 2000s, 2010s that weren't so great after Spectacular Spider-Man. So I can't say that, but I will say at least in the prime of Spider-Man animation, we were eating pretty well. Like there was a lot of there were a lot of Spider-Man cartoons. There are more good ones than bad ones, that's for sure. I'm not going to sit here and apologize for what Disney did in the last couple Spider-Man series, but hey,
You know what? Yeah, I take that one back. But
yeah,
yeah, man. Outside of that, man, for me, man, it's been a crazy month because obviously I think the last time we were on, we was basically discussing Elimination Chamber, and that was when Cena made the turn,
yes,
and everybody was like going crazy. It was one of our highest rated episodes on the YouTube. So shout to you guys, for shouting and supporting us that day.
yes.
Because there was a lot to talk about, and Eric definitely had a lot to say towards Bleacher Report in terms of their reviews, which was cool, and we kind of had some dialogue about going into WrestleMania, what constitutes as a match and whatnot. So it's been crazy. What's going on, Jabari? What's going on, man? Oh, by the way, sorry I haven't gotten back to you like from that message earlier. A lot has happened over the past month, but we were definitely getting back into it. So in the spirit of getting back into things, let's start off the show off with a question, an icebreaker question, like we do here on the broadcast. Now, recently, Abdullah the Butcher was recently photoed out of a wheelchair and able-bodied and losing an assortment amount of weight and looking great, all due to the process that he went through doing DDP yoga with Diamond Dallas Page and his people. And it made me think, like, how many lives has Diamond Dallas Page transformed over the last 20 plus years since he's been able to do DDP yoga. And, since they had the humanitarian award dedicated, in Warrior's name at Mania, I thought to myself, I was like, all right, man, let me pose this question to not just to the chat. We talked about it earlier last week. About, should DDP have a humanitarian award named after him? So Tyler, I asked you this question. So for those who are not watching, should WWE create a humanitarian award named after Diamond Dallas Page at the Hall of Fame?
Yes. He is one of the top candidates in my eyes of people who should be awarded for such things. I think Chris Nowinski is another one with his
That is another one.
But he's definitely up there for me. The stuff that he was able to do for Jake Roberts and Scott Hall, especially. If you count the number of people that have been helped, Chris Jericho and AJ Styles were both able to avoid surgeries due to doing DDP yoga. And that was AJ at the beginning of more so towards the beginning of his WWE career as well. And if you've seen the amount of crazy bumps and incidents AJ's been through, whether it be him getting drop kicked off the top of the Ultimate X and landing back first, whether it be him being Germaned onto a guardrail. Yeah, that happened.
He took a lot back then, man.
You should be grateful for DDP for that, because if you don't give AJ enough of that yoga, he doesn't have his initial WWE run. How you feel about Chris Jericho nowadays? I understand, but still,
he gave him a new lease at life in terms of wrestling, and none of that would have been possible without DDP. So he deserves, that much. Chris got a chance to continue his career, and however people feel about him now, including myself.
I can understand. I understand the AEW part, but everybody was a fan of the list.
So no. Everyone was definitely a fan of the list. None of that is possible without DDP. So like, a lot of credit, goes to that, because Chris wanted to come back. His back wasn't, helping him, him do what he loves to do. And DDP gave him a new lease on life. And, somewhat 18 years later, Chris is still at it, performing and wrestling at a very high level. None of that would have been possible without Diamond Dallas Page.
And, going back to Scott Hall and Jake Roberts, these are two guys that
got into the
hall, two guys that in general, we were saying for years we were going to lose much sooner.
Yeah.
Especially in a period where there are a lot of things about professional wrestling that we're kind of used to. And one of the biggest things that we're used to are people dropping like flies due to the results of steroid abuse and drug use and alcoholism and everything in between. I still agree with Brett. You should have just let them smoke weed, Vince. But in reality, a lot of people, so many people who should still be walking right now are gone due to the culture that existed in professional wrestling during the 70s, 60s, 80s, 90s. And Jake Roberts and Scott Hall were two people that for years, people online, people in the industry joked, made bets on people. They made bets on these guys dying.
Yeah, they made
like Honky Tonk Man made a whole bet, and he was hoping for Jake Roberts to pass away early. Like, these are, at least from my understanding, don't quote me on that, but
he lost that bet.
Yeah, and it makes me really happy. I mean, Jake Roberts is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time, and I've always enjoyed Scott Hall's work in the peak of his powers, whether he was Razor Ramon or whether he was with the Outsiders. But to see the two of them flourish for as long as they have, in the case of Scott, unfortunately, he did pass away a few years ago, but he extended his life so well. He made good on so many relationships towards the end. He was able to have a better end of his life with DDP than he ever would have without it. And those two alone, and those are and this is just the people that have been affected. Like, these were two people who were pretty much predetermined, no pun intended, to be a certain way. And he completely altered their fate. And off of that alone, I think that DDP should be in the running to have the award named after him. Not to say that the award was invalid prior to him, but we've seen other sports organizations name awards after people. We've seen in professional wrestling the Best Technical Wrestling Award of the year in the Wrestling Observer. It was named after Danielson for years and years and years. So I don't think it should be out of the consideration. I think DDP should have that right to be in that running for that name to be after him. And if not, he should win the award a couple times over to the point where it is associated with him. And this is just what he's done so far. The second half of DDP's career has been a great one to see, and I hope he ends up helping even more and more people, because I know he's doing it for the common people. He shows the results, and he shows people showing their befores and afters all the time, and I hope more of those people are helped. I hope more of the people that we're aware of are helped as well. I just hope it keeps going, honestly.
Yeah, I do too, man. I hope, because for me, it's not just, to watch away the Warrior would because of, who Warrior is. I just think that at this juncture in time, I think in terms of what he means to the community and what he's done, I think the award can be better used to someone that's currently living and is continuing to do the work in Diamond Dallas Page. So I feel like, that humanitarian award would be perfect, for him. I know they're not going to do it this year because they have their own built-in plans for the hall. But going into next year, New Orleans, going into New Orleans next year where WrestleMania is going to be held, I would like for that to happen, for him to have that award, and for him to be recognized for his second half of his career, doing what he's done for the sake of these wrestlers, enriching their lives, and not just wrestlers as well, regular people as well who've had different ailments over the course of their lives. Of course, he helped Hall of Fame boxer Butterbean, Butterbean get back to health in a sense. Like, he lost a significant amount of weight. He got some mobility back in his body after taking years of damage from boxing and other injuries he suffered throughout his career. Things like that. Like, someone who's done so much good should be heralded and should be honored for the stuff that he's put in. But we could talk about this good topic to the cows come home, but obviously we got to talk wrestling in terms of the here and now. So speaking of the here and now, WWE over the last month has gone to Europe and have had their televised European tour. From what you've gathered, from what you've surmised over this recent tour in the UK and parts of Eastern Europe, how do you for us American fans, do you feel that the American crowd has taken live WWE wrestling for granted?
How can you not? When we surmise these concepts, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I brought up was the fact that American fans essentially are spoiled with this because this is an American promotion. It was made in New York, based out of Connecticut, has its American tours, and other countries who don't get this stuff are going to obviously react a certain way because they don't get this all the time. European tours for professional wrestling from American promotions have always been pretty successful. I mean, it's not just for WWE. It was like that for TNA for a while. And as you can see with AEW, whenever they bring their shows over to London, they fill out. They filled out fairly well. I think that American fans, even in the wake of this boom period WWE has been in, I think they've been doing better in the past couple of years, but as a whole, there have been multiple years where WWE fans would just show up and not make any noise. And part of that is because the product wasn't exactly the greatest. But in the same regard, if you're going to show up, you have to be able to find fun in something. Like, you don't want everything to be a dud. So it's kind of been on the fault of them and the fault of the company. But even in the wake of the companies doing better, the funny thing is that if you look at some of these crowds now, sometimes they hijack the show with their reactions if you go to the European crowds. Because they'll be loud for certain segments and then they'll die off for others. No different than you see in America. It's just it's weird. Like, it's one of those things where, like, I appreciate the enthusiasm that they've shown when it's their turn. But in the same regard, it's not spread evenly throughout the show or even handsomely throughout the show, I should say. And it feels like it's really bringing to light a lot of the things that we've mentioned, how hollow the product can feel at times, and how a lot of these stars that are more than deserving of good reactions aren't getting them because there's not enough familiarity with them, because they're not being used the way that maybe would work to their benefit or the way that they deserve to be used. Like, I was looking at a clip from SmackDown where Casey Catanzaro, I think she's Katana Chance now, and Kaden Carter were doing a very impressive tag move. Jesus, Katana Chance is an unbelievable athlete. They were doing a move, and the crowd was going mild for the move, where you just see you see a whole human hand standing on another human's shoulders and doing a splash, and nothing.
And nothing.
And it made me upset because I sat there and I was like, I can't blame them for feeling that way, because where have these two been for the longest, or they haven't been promoted the best whenever they've been given chances on TV. But even so, I mean, that's still a very impressive thing. You'd think there would have been at least a bit of a reaction, but there wasn't much. And it really does break my heart, because now you're starting to see like a counter effect of these European crowds, where it's like they'll get hyped for the things that the American fans should get hyped for a little bit more, but then universally it's like it doesn't matter where you go, certain things just aren't going to get much love, and it's hard to watch at times. I'll say that.
It shouldn't be that way, because like it shouldn't be that way, but unfortunately that's what what we're given now. Like, they recently had this run to promote WrestleMania, but at the same time expose their new stars. But in the same token, like, it also didn't do like the other people that you're trying to bring up a good service as well. So it's just almost like a lot of those fans are attracted to the personalities that they do promote on TV. So what you see from an American crowd, it also in some ways reflects upon the European crowd, because they are not as invested into the other people, because all you're seeing from their perspective is the Cody Rhodes, the Seth Rollins, the Roman Reigns, the CM Punks, the Drew McIntyres, and then you get your favorites, you get your Charlotte Flairs, you get your Rhea Ripleys, your Liv Morgans. But when it comes to everybody else, it's like they're not as invested. I think that, like, and we've talked about this off air, where Trips has to do a much better job of spreading the wealth in terms of how you promote your talent, especially the undercard, because they're your support system when your main event scene needs it. Yes, the main event scene right now is going great, but I do feel that you to better support what you have going on the main event scene, you got to develop what you have, with your undercard, whether it's the mid card or the low card, like all rungs of the card in a wrestling card. They're all equally important. It's not just the main event scene that you have to tune into. I think I know you can echo the same. Like that has to be better so that when you do again go to these tours, these fans are more invested. They have more knowledge in terms of who they're getting into, in terms of these other competitors, because they're very, very talented. Like you just mentioned, Casey and of course Caden Carter. They've improved and done a great job since being on the main roster over the last year and some change. Obviously, the American crowds do the same thing in terms of not being as invested, but you still have to find something that can hook people into them so that when you guys, when they do have these tours, you don't get that drop off in terms of excitement or appreciation in terms of what you're seeing in the ring. Because if she did a great spot, like if Bianca did that, or Io did that, they'll be going crazy. Like you should have the same energy for those who are doing just as good as well. Just because they're not on as high on the card as they should be, doesn't mean that they're not good or good, talented for you to be invested in. Like this is why they're on the main roster for. This is why they have as much depth in that roster, whether it's NXT and or main roster, that they those things are important. And I think that if they're able to do that better, them going overseas, I think the reception will be better. That's just me.
Well, it all starts from that book in the creative room, and they need to start figuring out how to up the identities, assign identities, increase the identities of some of these people, and giving them ample time to really get that out there, which you would think it wouldn't be a problem considering they have 2 3-hour programs right now, but they have to keep pushing. And if it means integrating certain people with other people, having them associate with bigger stars so that people can know who they are, because in some hours I know viewership can drop off and here and there, but they just got to keep staying consistent with it. They have to start off strong and then stay consistent with it. They need that across the board. You got 3 tag divisions, you got 4 secondary titles, and you got 2 world championships. Not everything has to be about the belts, but you can't be pushing all this stuff during a content era and then having most of the content feel hollow. So
that's true. That is true. All right, man. Good stuff, man. Moving on to the next topic. Something that we kind of went back and forth with when we were having a conversation last Sunday as we were talking about, making up this episode. Does night 1 count as a main event at WrestleMania? Like what counts as a main event at a 2-night WrestleMania? Should it be the very last match of night 2? Or is it the last match of either card of that night? Because when we're going into nights, whether it's a regular house show or a Monday Night Raw into a SmackDown when they were doing it back to back at one point in time, what really counts as the main event? So like, Ty, I ask you, man, does night 1 count as a main event at like if you have a main event and during night 1 of WrestleMania, does that count?
Oh boy, here's where the pitchforks come in. The answer is yes, but it feels like no. How about that? If you want to go, this is the funny thing. Whenever someone says on a technicality, if you have to say on a technicality, it never feels as valid as the actual thing. And that's what kind of sucks about the main events of night 1 and night 2, because when you have 2 nights of WrestleMania, night 1 is the main event, let's put it in quotes. The last match on night 1 is a main event for WrestleMania, but it doesn't feel like one completely because it's also a halfway point for the entire weekend, right? Okay. Like, because it has that halfway point type of feeling, and because it usually has one of the lesser of the promoted matches on the card, it hasn't felt as prestigious as the night 2 main event in the entirety of all these day 1 WrestleMania. Well, these 2-night WrestleManias, with the exception of last year's when you had Cody Rhodes and Seth facing Roman and Rock, you could argue, but that's only because that felt more like a prelude to night 2, if anything.
Yeah.
And we've had situations in the entertainment industry where one movie or one part, or where part 1 feels better than part 2. I'm not saying no. I loved I liked Endgame. I liked Avengers Endgame, but there are plenty of people who will argue that Infinity War was better in significant numbers. And I can't sit here and disagree with that. Now, granted,
good analogy.
Granted, it's all subjective. It's all subjective, but if we're in the court of public opinion here, most people will consider night 1 a main event for the people that they like. Like, being in the night 1 main event is a great spot to be in. You do close WrestleMania. You just close the first half. You do main event one of the shows. Not to say no, but the reason why it even remotely matters to me is because of a couple different things, which will segue into other topics on this super show we're doing today, right? So, for example, number 1, this year is Roman Reigns' 10th WrestleMania main event. 2 of those 8 WrestleManias are closing night 1. So the ratio of main events for Roman when it comes to closing out WrestleMania, he's closed out WrestleMania 10 times if you count this upcoming main event, right?
Damn.
Yes. He is one of only a few wrestlers that can sit here and say they have main events even remotely close in those numbers.
So 10 of the last 11, that's a feat.
And out of those 10, 8 of those WrestleManias have closed the entire show. Only 2 have closed night 1, that being last year with the aforementioned tag match against Cody and Seth, and this year with the triple threat with CM Punk and Seth, which we will get to fairly soon. But notice how it's always been the end of the show. Now, granted, Roman Reigns has been the face of this promotion for over a decade. Not going to sit here and say no. But I offer you this. Would you feel like Roman Reigns properly main evented WrestleMania had a couple of these previous year main events had only happened on night 1? Would it have felt appropriate to you for Roman to only main event the night 1s? Not just off your personal feeling, but considering all factors. Had Roman main evented only night 1 these past couple of years, would it have felt correct? Would it, maybe creatively it would have felt correct, but would you have felt like this is kind of weird? Is what I'm saying.
I give you one better. So Ty, like, which of Roman's matches in the last 10 years which main evented WrestleMania? Which one of those matches would you have put as a night 1 main event?
Versus Taker. There's no reason why that match should have been the ending note of a WrestleMania, and they know that. And granted, this is before the 2-night format, but even when it was 1 night, they know damn well that shouldn't have main evented. The build for that match was horrendous. There was literally a point where their stare down was just Taker putting his hands up like a question mark, and the screen faded to black. There's no reason why that had to main event WrestleMania, and they know that.
That was a bad build, bro.
Now, I will say that could have been a night 1 main event if you wanted to add the main event pad statting moniker to it, which is another argument people will make. And I don't want to say, okay, this is completely invalid, because I don't want to take away these moments from Bianca and Sasha, if you will, from Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn and the Usos, if you will. It's not for me to sit here and say, oh, I want these taken away. They deserve those prominent spots at WrestleMania for all intents and purposes. And this is coming from a guy who didn't believe that Sasha and Bianca should have main evented that WrestleMania, not because they didn't deserve it, but because of how it was built to. They didn't do that build justice enough to where I felt like it felt weird to put it in the main event.
Oh, you set it up for the next question. Lovely.
But
I like how you did that.
But what I'm saying is that when you really put it into perspective, yes, it counts. No one's saying, like, yes, it counts, but it feels more like it counts on a technicality than it counts off of a prestige level in actuality. a lot of those main events that on night ones, I feel like do have a right to close the show. And I do feel like the people who are selected for those spots should be considered for closing the shows too. But as the company gets bigger and is trying to appeal even more to the mainstream, as there's more celebrity involvement, as they want WWE to be branding even more than they've already had, it's hard for me to sit here and actually be able to fathom them putting anyone else other than a Rock, a Cody, or a Roman in the main event. It's very similar to the Hogan era in that regard, where like you had people like Ricky Steamboat, you had people like Roddy Piper, you had people like Macho Man, you had Ted DiBiase, you had Jake Robb. The names I'm listing off right now were all-time greats, despite not being able to reach their full creative potential because they kept pushing Hogan. But if Hogan wasn't in the main event, as hardcore wrestling fans, we wouldn't have been bothered because we know a lot of these other people are deserving. But when you think about it as a whole, it feels weird that he's not in the main event because that's where he's been primed for so long and he is the big cash cow at that time, right? So I sit here and say it does count. But even if a technicality or a rule does make it feel, does validate it to a degree, how you feel about that technicality, how you feel about that situation, I feel is also as valid. And I feel like that's the reason why we have this whole debate in the first place. So yes, Kevin Owens, multi-time WrestleMania main eventer, asterisk, didn't get the main event that maybe he should have deserved. It feels more like something you can put on your resume, but you don't feel like it's as fulfilled of a accomplishment as it should be. Not to take it away from him, because considering his run, he's earned it. Considering his run, he deserves that praise, but there's still a slight hollowness to it because you know that he should have gotten the other thing. And that brings me back to a story. I know I've been talking for a minute. I apologize.
No. You could continue to cook.
But remember, one of the biggest stories of this year is CM Punk is finally main eventing at WrestleMania. I find an irony in that, considering the fact that CM Punk has been involved in a lot of big matches in WrestleMania in his career, and CM Punk has faced The Undertaker for his streak. It wasn't the main event. And understandably so, Rock and Cena. That was Rock and Cena 2, mind you. He faced Chris Jericho for the WWE Championship. Wasn't the main event. And now that he's finally getting the main event, ironically enough, it is still not the main event of the entire show. And I'm happy that he's finally getting some form of it, but that's the key term. It's some form of it. And I hope they make the most out of it.
All right, so let's keep the topic on Punk real quick. Obviously, this past Friday on SmackDown, obviously it was officially named the fact that the triple threat match between him, Seth, and Roman will be main eventing night 1 at WrestleMania. And you alluded to the fact in terms of him finally getting that moment. So personally, in terms of like, I think you might have answered it by saying the fact that it still feels like he got it, but it still feels like an asterisk to it. What do you think it would take for Punk to feel like he got that WrestleMania moment? Because obviously it's not this year. We're talking more so in the future ahead because now he has more time behind him than in front of him. So what would be that kind of main event look like for a CM Punk or a Kevin Owens, if you will? Because this is a question that could fit either one of those guys.
In the case of CM Punk, it's most WrestleMania main events are the right story at the right time with the right intensity to where it feels like this, where you get that big fight feel. I know that term's been killed to death, but when you feel the intensity in the air, when you can feel a tension between the two competitors to where this is what you want to see, that feeling validates most main events on any pay-per-view, let alone a WrestleMania. So for this situation, Punk can't be in a better situation unless he was facing Seth one-on-one. And the only reason why we don't have that tension with that anymore is because we've seen enough Punk and Seth one-on-ones at this point to where if they were going to give us that, it should have been held or Mania first, and then post Mania we could have gotten the rematches. But considering where he is creatively right now, this was the best situation he could have gotten to get that main event, especially considering that there was no chance on this earth that if Roman was active for this Mania, he wasn't going to get one of those two closing matches. So this is the best situation for him now. It could have been a world title situation with Seth last year, but everything broke at the last second.
You got hurt.
Yes.
You got hurt.
And to be fair, Seth shouldn't even have been in WrestleMania that year either, considering how hurt he was. But he toughed it out. He pushed as best as he could, But the reality of the situation is that this is the best scenario, considering all that has happened. And I am happy for him again that he does get this opportunity. You could see the emotion on his face from SmackDown when they were doing the contract signing. Again, it's the feeling that you feel. And in the case of Punk, if this is the best chance he has to get this, I'm happy for him. I will still always be on the side of, as a wrestling fan, you would want those talents to get that much more because they've sacrificed so much, and you can feel it in your bones that they do deserve even more than what they're getting. So that's how I feel about it.
Okay, no, it's a good talk. It's a good talk. Good stuff. Let's hit our segment real quick. We call it "Be the GM" as we fantasy book. We are a fantasy booking podcast here, so let's fantasy book real quick, Ty. In this stacked episode, in our return back into potting, let's be the GM real quick. How do we get the women back to main eventing at a night at WrestleMania? Obviously, we had a couple. We had, the triple threat match with Becky, Charlotte, and Ronda Rousey at WrestleMania 35 in New York at MetLife. And then, of course, we had the one recently in the rain in Tampa when COVID was happening between Bianca Belair and the artist formerly known as, Sasha Banks, now known as Mercedes Moné in AEW. How do we get the women back to main event WrestleMania? And the second part of that question is, who do you think, if there was an opportunity to main event a night at WrestleMania, who would be the two women that you would put or book to main event that match?
So let me preface by saying that I hate the fact that the women have to work 3 times as hard just to get a night one main event, if any main event at WrestleMania, and it shouldn't be that way. Okay. This is also in the wake of rumors that Evolution's coming back, which called it. What do you call it?
Somebody's watching this show because we were the first people to kind of start talking about, maybe they should do a pay-per-view for women again because, y'all got enough on your roster. So,
hey, if they're watching, can they start paying? Thank you. That being said, what do you call it? I
need a house. I need a house.
I need a lot, but I will say this: it's a shame that it is that way, that they have to work as hard. But let's clarify what goes into Mania main events nowadays. Mm-hmm. The most important people on the roster, regardless of the quality of the storyline, it has to be the biggest stars to go through. So if we're being realistic, the only way that the women are going to get a main event at WrestleMania is if there are 2 stars on a similar level that are amongst the most popular stars in the company with that hot streak, and that's how you're going to get it. It's the only way. The quality of the storyline isn't always that great. Like, if we're going back to Sasha and Bianca, there was a point where Reggie was involved, and it was all this it wasn't perfect. It wasn't that fulfilling. But thankfully, they got the spot that they got, right? So the quality can be here or there. It should be good. Let's get that out the way. It should be good quality, but it's not completely necessary with these things. We've seen people get Mania main events for less. And that's the entire history of WrestleMania, if we're being quite honest. So let's put it this way. Of all the stars right now that they currently have, the highest chance you have of a Mania main event is a match involving either a Bianca, a Rhea Ripley, a Charlotte, maybe a Becky, maybe a Jade. Those are basically your 5. Now, is that fair? No. No. There's no reason why the only reason why stars like Nia Jax and Io Shirai and Liv Morgan and what do you call it? Stars that are just a tier below in terms of the highest stars of the division. That's saying something considering Io is the current champion right now. But the only reason why those stars don't feel like they can is because you can feel that WWE has not invested enough credibility in those stars on a consistent basis to where you go, I see them in the same tier as these guys, and I can't be shaken on that front. Now, you might feel they deserve to be there. What's up? What's good?
What's good, Ivan? What's good, Ivan?
You might feel they deserve to be there, but do you feel that they actually are there? In most cases, it's a no. And that's on the company. And if you want to get more of those women in that main event selection, you have to invest in them hard. You have to give them storylines that are worth it. You have to give them good work throughout the entire year to build to that payoff. And unfortunately, in the past couple of years, as we've mentioned on many different episodes of the podcast, you've had Rhea Ripley literally obliterate the entire women's roster, sacrifice most of those women to Rhea, to where she didn't have anybody to fight for the longest time, even up until recently, right? You had people get fed to Bianca Belair for a while. We talked about on that Sunday, one of the biggest talking points of last year's Mania. Why couldn't we have Io versus Bayley be in the main event of WrestleMania, considering that Bayley won the Rumble?
And now it's a built-up story, honestly.
A storyline that was built up for about 2 years at that point.
It was built up. It was properly built up, too.
I don't know about completely properly, but it wasn't a terrible.
But compared to other stories that were rushed going into Mania,
yes,
by far that was a more better built story than other stories that you just crumpled together the last 8 weeks before Mania.
Fair. The right term would be relatively. It was relatively well built up compared to others, and there's no reason at this point why WWE should trick the audience into thinking that the main event of WrestleMania will be guaranteed by a Rumble winner if it's not Cody Rhodes or if it's not someone in that tier. Fair. But the point I'm trying to make at this point in time is if Bayley doesn't feel like a WrestleMania main eventer, what are the chances that Nia will? What are the chances that Io will? What are the chances that a lot of these women will? And it makes me sad because there's no reason why these talents shouldn't feel more important. Now, Evolution, if it does happen this year, there will be a small part of me that is happy because I will get to see all these women get a solo-focused spotlight. But there's also going to be a part of me that's upset, not because the event is happening, but because it's going to feel like a giant compensation for the terrible job this company has done for a while in terms of treating the rest of their women's roster like they have a reason to be there outside of filling a few spots. And don't get me wrong, the secret Hervis,
that
dope.
boy,
dope. Don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong.
That's creative. That's
seeing
dope.
Seeing DFAB and Michin as a group and them being integrated into other storylines, cool. Seeing Naomi get this spotlight right now, cool. Here's my thing. In a company that is known for having inconsistent pushes, whether it's stop and start during Vince or here, you did your good job, guys, back to catering, like in Triple H's situation recently, and I mean that with the utmost respect, how long does this last? How long does that momentum hold? How long does it take for the audience to eventually forget and throw these people away? Now, when people take time off TV, the audience will forget for a period of time. But when a Becky Lynch comes back, because there's so much established behind her, there are certain stars where you know, or you have at least a high belief that that star is going to be okay when they come back. The fans will welcome them back. They'll be able to shoot straight up. It'll feel fresh. It'll feel refreshing. You feel like they can go back to where they were before, but with a new lease on life. If that happens to Naomi now, will you feel that in 6 months?
Good question.
You might feel it with Becky because Becky's done some shit. In the case of Naomi, no fault of her own, they haven't allowed her to do enough to where if Naomi took a 6-month hiatus, that might be that might be wraps for her for a little bit. Maybe not, obviously not forever, but for a while, it'll take a while for her to regain any momentum, if not the momentum she had before. So that's why I offer all of this. This is why I say all of this, because right now, the product is at a point where people are so happy off the highlights that we forget that these shows are not 10-minute highlights. These are 3-hour episodes.
3 hours.
Building to 2 5-hour WrestleManias, mind you. That's a lot of time to fill. And that's a lot of people that are going to get opportunities that are going to have to work times 10 just to get a good reaction out of you. Not a great, a good reaction. So when I think about it in terms of the women, the women's tag team championship situation has existed for years. Part of the reason why Naomi and Sasha left, because they were being placed in a division that had a fork in it already. To the point where they were facing each other. And let's be fair, where it is now is not where it was when they left, but it is not far from it. It is down the block. We have not gone leaps and bounds with it. It is down the block.
At least they walked to the end of the block first. I mean, listen, you got like, at least something that I'm trying to do this year more so is allow a little bit of grace.
No, don't get me wrong. That is my grace, because let's be honest. Do we still have a women's tag division?
Yeah, we do.
We do not have a women's tag division. I'm thinking
NXT. I mean, because I still think NXT is an extension.
I'm talking about Raw and SmackDown, because that women's tag title doesn't go to NXT enough. NXT has had multiple women's tag teams for the past 5 years that could have filled that division out, but they just don't. They didn't want it. Did the whole thing with that. But the point I'm trying to make, there's still these issues that existed a couple years ago still linger on. There are people backstage who still feel unfulfilled because they haven't put. And I'm saying this. That's what I'm saying with all due respect, because I'm not saying there aren't good aspects. I gave some grace, but I have to be honest. So if you're asking, how do we get the women to main event, whether it be for a singles championship?
I haven't said it all depends how they get booked, how the fans get invested in the story heading into Mania. I mean, that's true. That's true.
How they get booked, all of that is true. They need to get booked. They need to get booked.
We don't want that, man. We don't want that, but because I think all right, but see, here's my thing with my fault. Here's my thing about staying on the topic in terms of WrestleMania, right? Because, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves in terms of we don't want to forecast too far into the future. As far as WrestleMania is concerned and getting the women back to the main event, they have enough. And you mentioned the 5 names. You've mentioned Becky. You've mentioned Charlotte. You've mentioned, you've mentioned those names. How you cultivate a story that's good enough to basically grab your attention. Like, say, for instance, out of those 5 names, you could have possibly make a combination of like a good, 10 matches, depending on the combination.
Yes,
right?
Absolutely.
So let's take. I have 2 matches that two involve with the same person, but let's say, for instance, Rhea Ripley and Bianca Belair, which should have been the rumored match, right?
A match that should have also happened 2 years ago.
Based off of to tell a story like that going into the Mania next year, you should be what they're doing now. They have to continue with that story throughout the year. I'm not saying okay, every week they have to interact, but have enough depth in that arc between those two. So by the time when you're ready to ramp it up, you don't have to basically remind the fans or hit the fans over the head saying, "Oh, remember this happened?" No, you've seen bits and pieces of this story culminating to this moment. You can have this WrestleMania triple threat match, and however that match ends, and I'm pretty sure the way it's looking, neither one of them is going to win that one. So it's going to set either one of them off in a certain way so they can find each other again and use that as fuel to get back to the main event, whether they're champions or not. You have a person of Rhea Ripley's caliber. She's won multiple world championships. She's beaten Charlotte in a very good match, which, in your opinion, you've said this when we saw WrestleMania that weekend, in the city. that should have main evented that night. As much as you love Sammy and KO, he's like, damn, that match should have main evented because of how good they came out. Last year, you talked about Io and and Bayley. They told that story for 2 years after Bayley came back from her ACL tear. And for she was in the middle pack of the card, but at the same time, like that story, how she had to come back from what she went through to get all the way to be in a group, get kicked out of the group, and then come back to this point where it's like, nah, I'm coming back for everything. And then culminate to winning it at WrestleMania and then the payoff after. Yeah, I know, knowing you they definitely dropped the ball on that. So for a story like Rhea and Bianca to have shelf life and enough momentum going into next year, you have to do a better job telling that story now.
I don't disagree with you. I think if anything, there's even another perspective on that, because you can make the argument that Bianca versus Bianca versus Rhea could also be built just off of the prestige they've already built. Like I said before with the Becky and people of that nature is the reason why I mentioned 5. A lot of those people already have legs to stand on, right? Bianca Belair versus Rhea Ripley for the women would be very similar to what we had pictured since 2006 when John Cena and Batista face each other. They are very similar. There are a lot of comparisons you can make between that dynamic and this in terms of where they stood in the company, being built separately from one another, them not touching each other for the longest time, having stare downs, but never really getting physical up until recent times, to where you could build a story out of that too. And I know I was voicing some of my frustrations, but at the end of the day, those are the only type of talents you can have be in the main event right now because of the sins of what they've done in the past. You can have as much as you can make the argument for Bianca and Rhea, you can make the same argument for Bianca and Charlotte. As much as you want, you can justify another Charlotte and Becky main event. And people would be like, we don't need to see this again, but it's like, who else is really on this level to do that?
For that, I beg to, I'm not gonna lie to you, like, I would be invested in another Becky Charlotte WrestleMania only because of the fact that so much has happened since 35.
Yes, but in the same token, because they've been two of the only people that have been pushed so much, you can make a decent argument for it being redundant. But at the same time, what other choice do you have? Because you don't have many stars that could main event right now based off of their standing in the company and what legs they've been given to work on.
You don't think Liv could?
I said earlier that she can't. Not because she doesn't have the ability. People need to separate this. It's not that they don't have the ability to, but realistically speaking, would you put Liv Morgan right now in a WrestleMania main event? She's been one of the main focuses of Monday Night Raw for about a year and a half. And I still don't feel like she could be in a WrestleMania main event, not because she isn't worthy, deserving, or able. It's because she doesn't have the same. If it was going to happen, it was going to happen with Rhea. And similar to CM Punk and Seth, what did they do? Raw on Netflix. And towards the end of that storyline, they were getting terrible at keeping the storyline making sense. They had an opportunity to take a break from it to come back for Mania season, and they opted not to do that. So at the end of the day, if you want these women to main event, they have to the point of everyone else, start strong, start making more talents throughout the year that can be in a similar range to these existing talents, and then use the existing talents that already can do it and build that good story, like you said, whether it be built over the course of a year or it's built shortly off of their reputation. You can do it, because at the end of the day, people wanted Rhea and Bianca this year. They wanted it this year after the Royal Rumble. There was not a lot of time to build that story between the two because Bianca was already involved in the shit with Jade, right? You weren't going to get that solo story no matter how you slice it this year. So if anything, it was going to be built off of reputation more so than anything. So at the end of the day, it all comes down to them taking that proper chance and them spreading the wealth, something we've been preaching for weeks. And that's all I got to say about that.
Hey, man, that's a great way to close it. So all in all, like how I would, book it for me at least, if I was doing a match like a Bianca and Rhea, I'd start sometime now, and like I would continue to put pieces and add layers to that story over time until when they finally pull that trigger. I don't think Bianca and Charlotte necessarily need that same kind of time to do it, because you could put Charlotte in anything, and the story is already there. Like, she beat 3 out of the 4. Can she complete the sweep and dethrone the queen? Like, that's Bianca's claim to become the queen. And obviously Bianca still has a lot of open stories despite that, and still can get back to Rhea, because obviously if you look at her trajectory right now, she's not done with Jade after Mania. And I know Rhea is close to crashing out, because the last couple of weeks or month or so, Charlotte has been calling her a child. Adam Pearce, God bless that man, because he's that man's stressed. Even he called her a child.
But on that closing note, the way that we're talking about the women right now is the same way that we're talking about like booking another CM Punk main event, booking another Roman main event, booking another set. That's what I want to leave the audience with. Do you want to get to a point where those are the only people that can, or do you want to get to a point where you can have EO main event and it doesn't feel like a here nigga damn moment? Do you want to get? I want to get to that point where you can have someone like a Lyra Valkyria main event and no one questions it much.
Yeah, that's
You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
All right, no problem, man. Good shit, good talk, man. All right, man. March is obviously Women's History Month, and we did spend a good chunk of this last segment talking about women in the BDGM segment. I would, since we haven't been on all month because life and touching grass, I would like to close this month, basically commemorating the women's current era of today's wrestling.
Okay.
We've talked about it. We alluded to a lot of it on the show in terms of how far they've come, despite the things that were given back in the day. I like to showcase and give love to the current era of the women of today. Because of the fact that there's so much of them doing well at the same time at this point, whether you're watching WWE or Raw, SmackDown, NXT, TNA, even AEW now, the women are really making a stamp in this era, especially over the last 5 or so, maybe longer, over the last decade or so, have made their stamp into the industry. Whether it was when the 4 Horsemen were running NXT during the Black and Gold era when they first came onto the main roster, or how the Knockouts were basically carrying the state of women's wrestling for years. And then AEW now, at least at this point, starting to basically cultivate credible characters within their division that they can, fans can get invested with. That's not Mercedes Moné. Like, you can see a Megan Bain and look like, damn, she is a star. You see Toni Storm, who when she left WWE, she's really blossomed and used her timeless character and done a great job with it. Mariah May, when she signed and seeing what she's done, and of course you flip over to WWE, you see what for the last decade or so, the NXT, the women's division in NXT have done a great job in terms of representing women's wrestling. And even now with Stephanie Vaquer, you see Julia, you see Zarya, you see, Jada Parker, who's the hood's favorite. You see Jakara Jackson, Lash Legend, who's definitely improved and looks to be coming to the main roster sooner rather than later. I like to, give the flowers of today's talent because of how far they've come, and none of that would have happened with those that came before them, even before the Horsewomen. Like, we're talking about the people that really put in the groundwork so these women can definitely do what they're doing today. So I got to give these women their flowers today. So what do you think about that, Ty?
Agreed. I think it'd be best if we start naming off some of those people. Are there certain talents that you want to highlight or you want to put on to an audience that, nowadays we often forget until a tweet or Instagram post comes in and reminds us? Are there people you want to highlight?
I mean, we could talk about Mia Yim. Like, when she came, it was hard for her to find a footing in WWE, obviously, because she was with Retribution. And looking where she's at now, you look at BFAB and how she's done a great job, you know, after getting fired in that whole story in terms of how that took place, and now she's back and really starting to find her groove. Her and Charlotte did some work last week, previous week on SmackDown. You look at Liv Morgan, who no one really saw as becoming something, and she's cultivated that. You look at Nia Jax, who's really improved herself in the second run of her career. You even look at, even with the Death Riders angle in AEW, you look at Marina Shafir and what she's doing. She's being more comfortable in where she's at now. You know, I don't think Mercedes is no longer phoning it in terms of her matches. She's starting to care. And finally, Athena is on AEW TV, not ROH, but AEW TV by going to Collision. So it's like you're starting to see these women start to come out and be, you know, appreciated for their success and recognized for it in this era. And everywhere you turn, there's someone, you know, there's a tweet, there's a story about whomever who's like, one day it could be Stephanie, you know, Fekir, who defended her 2 titles this past week on NXT. It could be, you know, how, you know, like Mariah, you see how like Toni Storm is a defending champion, and, you know, getting into a lot of these people, and possibly could shake it up with Megan Bayne along the way. Like, and then of course you can look at the women's main roster. You see the transformation of Naomi as a character. Everyone sees her as this bubbly baby face who would never turn heel and be a believable heel. But after that promo on SmackDown this past week, you're like, oh, hold on now. She might got something to her. Like, I'm invested. And like, for me, because we've talked about this for years, even when we were watching NXT together. For whatever reason, I find more joy seeing how the women have come out in storylines and really putting boot to ass and lighting a fire, and how the men should be basically handling their business, you know, in their respective, you know, divisions and on the card, and seeing them blossom. Like, I've had a real fun time seeing these women really blossom. You know, is it perfect? No. But compared to what you see 20 years ago, or even during the Bella era and stuff like that.
Hold on. You're absolute. No, that's my. I'm not disagreeing. I'm using it as a segue because you're right in a lot of regards.
Okay.
It's very nice to see all these things happen. I do want to offer some love to previous divisions, because I feel like at this point, there's a good section of the audience that has been told, and in some cases programmed, to believe that women's wrestling didn't do enough. And in a lot of regards, it didn't. But for the people that did, you gave some names. I'm going to give some names as well, because this is Women's History Month for all the women. All right. So let's give love to some of these previous eras of American wrestling. For example, names like Sarah Stock. You know, you might remember her as Theresa in TNA. Taylor Wilde, Gail Kim, Awesome Kong, Roxy Laveau, Daphne. Let's give some love to Tiffany when she went over to TNA as Taryn Terrell and was tearing it up with Gail Kim. Let's give love to the Melinas of the world, the Mickey James of the world, the Michelle McCools, the Laylas. Let's give love to AJ Lee, someone who WWE spent years trying to make us forget about. Let's give love to the Ivories, the Molly Hollies, the Victorias, the Jazzes, you know, the Alundra Blazes, the Aja Kongs. Gotta give
China her love too.
Yes, you gotta give, like, we're gonna get, like, I had a conversation with Golden Child, with Jay a couple weeks ago, about how, you know, he's been able to go back into the archives and watch a lot of these different eras and seeing a lot of the talent, and seeing that there were a lot of good matches from those periods, even despite the small time limits, and how the only difference now is not always never been a talent thing, but there have been plenty of these great matches throughout WWE's history. It's just now that the focus has been allowing the women to do something, and allowing the women to be as much a part of the show as the men are to some degree. You talk about the fire that a lot of these talents have. Of course, they have the fire. They've been waiting for this. A lot of generations of women have been waiting for this. That's why you see people like Trish come back, Lita come back, and want to rip it with the newer talents. They've been waiting for a while, And with every opportunity they're given, whether it's good, bad, long-term, or fleeting, they make the most out of it. They should be damn proud of themselves. And it shouldn't be a shock that the women can do this, but it should be more than a pleasure to be able to watch them do this. So I agree with you. But giving the love to everybody all around, we could be here all day because if we mention women from other countries and other promotions as well, this would be a 3-hour episode. But yes.
I have a sub question to this one. All right.
Okay.
So in the state of the current era of women's wrestling today, now we're not talking about what you might know might happen. Let's just say hypothetically, things kind of go the way it's supposed to. Where do you see the state of women's wrestling in the next, I can't say 5 because a lot of things can change. Let's just say 2 for now. Where do you see the state of women's wrestling, at least in the next 2 years? Like,
I think that some of the talents from NXT will catch when they come to the main roster, whether it be a Jada Parker, whether it be a Stephanie Vaquer, a Julia, or any of them. I think they will catch a lot of fire. And I think that they will make great additions to the Intercontinental and U.S. tag. Like U.S., I just pulled a Jimmy Uso right there. I think they will make great additions to the secondary title scenes of the women's division. And I think some of them will break through and become immediate contenders for the world title because they do need to shake things up and they need some fresh meat. I say that as a general term. I know some people might take that the wrong way, but
listen, Matt's not on the episode to say pause, so we good.
Right now. But I will say they're going to need fresh contenders. So I think that people like Roxanne, a lot of those prominently NXT stars for the past few years will make those impacts. But roughly speaking, you can't say that a match should mean it.
Well, this is earlier, so I'm just looking back. So
okay, cool.
That's true. I'm not gonna lie, that is true. They need more women writers backstage to write for women. Not like
they do need more women's writers, but they also need more people in general that believe in the women, man or woman, to give them those opportunities. So we need both, in my opinion, not just one or the other. But I will say, I don't think the women's division will change too drastically in the next 2 years. And what I mean by that is there will be a plentiful amount of talent, but you can argue there's a plentiful amount of talent now. It's just you don't care as much about the people right now as you do the people that might be coming up. But if the Ronda Rousey situation has shown me anything, is that you can add some new names and give them some prominent runs, but if the rest of the division feels flat, then the whole division feels flat. Like Ronda Rousey, people talk about how great the women's division was with Ronda Rousey's first run in WWE, but it was just Ronda killing people and then some of the horsewomen being on top. And then when the second run came in,
she phoned it in.
It's not even, no, she wasn't prepared in either run. That's the thing. The second run just exposed the fact that she wasn't as big an asset to the division as they thought, in the sense that it was gonna like light up the entire division. It lighted up a few storylines. It didn't fix or enhance the entire division because Ruby Riott was still getting killed. Liv Morgan still wasn't relevant. A lot of those talents were just being fed to her. It was more so a storyline was being shot to the roof. And that story was Ronda's being in the company versus the entire division flourishing as a whole. You know what I'm saying? With Ronda coming in, gave us the first ever women's WrestleMania main event. That's true. Why are we still feeling the effects of the division feeling hollow all these years later? That's what I'm saying. So if anything, I don't think anything will change too drastically in the next 2 years. I would like to see it that way. I still don't see a women's main event at WrestleMania in the next 2 years unless they bank on Bianca and Rhea. I hope I'm wrong because I want to be wrong. But considering the current trajectory of things, I don't think it'll change in the next 2 years. Maybe 5, but not 2.
Okay. Now, I just want to be realistic because if I said 5, because I'm like many things would change. Like, how would you see the window at least 2 years? It would be a healthy enough window, but that's pretty good. All right, man. I think we pretty much covered a lot of stuff today in our first thing back, and we did it under an hour and a half.
True. There was one thing I did want to offer to the people.
Okay.
And I guess we'll use this as the prelude for the next episode. How do y'all feel about having this many multi-person matches at WrestleMania with this much prominence behind it? Because I know there's a generation of you guys that grew up on a lot of matches at WrestleMania that were multi-man matches, kind of being more like show attractions. They weren't so much the main focuses of the show, right? Like, remember, we grew up on the Money in the Banks, and we grew up on, like, some tag matches in the pre-show and stuff like that. But now we have two big-time triple threats at WrestleMania. We have a possible multi-person match for the Intercontinental Championship with decent build compared to previous multi-person Intercontinental title matches.
Please
Lord
win,
knows,
Finn. Please win, Finn.
nope, who knows?
I'm not gonna win, but
Nope. Uh, uh, there are two. The tag. Who knows what the tag division will be doing at WrestleMania on all tag divisions, right? So it seems like this Mania is going to have a lot of multi-person matches. Tell us some of your favorite multi-person WrestleMania matches in Mania's history, whether it be triple threats, fatal four-ways, multi-man tags. Tell us some of your favorites. Tell us how you feel about a card that's full of them, because I know a lot of y'all did not like WrestleMania 2000. So tell us how you feel about that concept kind of coming back in a way. And tell us, do you think more matches should be one-on-one? That was a thing that Wrestle Kingdom did for a while, where, in their culture, like, the multi-person matches can happen, but typically things are settled 1v1. How do you feel about that? And I guess we'll answer that next week.
all right, man. Good stuff. Good stuff. I know E is not here today, but in terms of the match of the week, do you have a match in mind, off the top of your head, Ty, that you would like people to kind of go back and watch into the Rolodex of the Peacock Network and or Daily Motion, because they got certain matches in much better quality than the Peacock Network.
A match that I would like people to watch. Well, considering that her career is coming to a close pretty soon, Maiko Satomura, one of the greatest women's competitors, regardless of country, regardless of promotion. I would like for everyone to check out some of the work she did in NXT, and the Vault recently uploaded this. Her versus Roxanne Perez for the NXT Women's Championship, I believe. I believe it. Well, don't quote me on it, but watch her against Roxanne Perez. If you're not too familiar with Roxanne Perez, which I know a lot of the internet is, but for the ones that aren't, check that out. It gives you a good idea of how much potential she has, and you get a little taste of the greatness Maiko had been performing at for the past 20, almost 30 years. So that's my match of the week from NXT. Again, much love to the women. Unfortunately, we couldn't be here for a majority of Women's History Month, but we here at the Backstage Brawl love women's wrestling. Want to see the best for women's wrestling. Want to see more strength and credibility and consistency put into the division, their stories, their titles, and everything in between. So one victory, we might have got you Evolution back. And hopefully we can see some more victories for the women going forward.
Yeah, so that one WWE employee who's watching our stuff, please, at least listen to that. Take that little tidbit and just push, more women into prominent, event, spots on the card, like a WrestleMania main event or another women's Evolution with Gail Kim, Mickie James. I don't know, producing and all women based. That would be fun. Hey. All women camera crew, women's commentary team. They deserve it, man. And that's something I would love to see.
If WWE were, if it were a perfect scenario, WWE would hire Gail Kim and let her help run the women's division on both shows or whichever show she'd want. But that's another conversation for another day.
I would give them the Leon Rose treatment. Like Triple H could be James Dolan and Gail Kim could be Leon Rose. Let her do her stuff and magic gonna happen. For those who are Knicks fans, no. But outside of that, quickly before I go, my match of the week, since we're on the road to WrestleMania, I would like to I saw this match again, and I just thought to myself, like, it is a crime that we haven't seen more of them, more of these. The first brother versus brother match at WrestleMania 10 between Bret Hart and Owen. It still pains me the fact that he never won the Winged Eagle title, because he would have looked great.
Well, he never won.
WWF champion.
Those house shows, however, gave people a taste. But
yes, he should have been WWF champion.
One of the best.
He should have been.
One of the best WrestleMania openers of all time. If not, it's one of my favorites. It's between that and Eddie and Ray for me.
Those were two good openers. Yeah,
I love Brett versus Owen. It is like, it's kind of weird because that match is similar to what we see now. A lot of people will get like a top level match at the beginning of a pay-per-view in WWE now. Like you'll open with a main event level match and end with a main event level match. And that was one of the earliest instances of that in WWE in WrestleMania, where you got two of the absolute best on the roster pairing it up for well over 15, going way over 15, and just having this type of match that would set up the main event later in the night.
Yeah, man, so, you gotta start hot and finish hot, and like if you want to keep the momentum and the crowd involved, especially at that time at the Garden, that's what you want to do, man. Like, you know, just watching.
And Owen won, you bastards.
I just felt that Owen was. It's a shame we never got him with the main title, because had he lived and Kurt Angle came on at the same time, like we probably would have gotten a better match than Regal Jericho ever put on. Like when they put it on at Mania 17, like no, like to see that technical the technical prowess of like that match would go crazy.
Look, okay, hold on. Come on. All right, first of all, we're not going to attack Regal Jericho right now.
I'm not. Yo, I'm not. I'm just saying.
I'm doing what you did earlier. See, no, but seriously, we did get Owen and Kurt. We should have gotten so many more memories, of course. But yes, let's focus on the Mania 10 match. Yes, Owen and Brett, an amazing matchup, a match that most wrestling fans should see, a matchup that also set up the summer very nicely as well that year for Owen and Brett, and
that it did.
And I think it should be ranked higher in most people's WrestleMania matches, especially off the wrestling purity of it as well. So yes, if you want pro wrestling, it doesn't get much better than Brett versus Owen, especially in that company. So go ahead and watch that on any of the sites and networks you can find it on.
Watch that match become a Hall of Fame match, and then Bret Hart will be the first 4-time Hall of Famer.
It's true.
He's already a 3-time Hall of Famer now with the match against Austin. So,
I mean, Bret Austin Mania 13. What do you call it? Bret and Owen WrestleMania 10.
Him and Shawn at 12.
I don't know if people are going to want to put the one at 12. I know there's a lot of contention with that, but maybe they will. I mean, and that's just inducting WrestleMania matches. This is assuming they stick to just Mania matches, because if you want it, Bret might end up having as many. He might end up becoming a 16-time Hall of Fame champion. So.
Like Bret might have like more Hall of Fame rings. Like between him and Shawn, that would settle the GOAT debate. You know, you see how people talk about the basketball GOAT debate?
No. That debate is ruining basketball. But I will say, I will concede, and I will say that if Bret does get more of his matches inducted into the Hall of Fame, he's going to have to put some of those rings on his toes. So fair enough.
That is true. All right, guys, man, we've been back. You know, this is our first episode back. Appreciate to the 73 people that are in the chat right now. Thank you guys for welcoming. Shout out to Sports for You Wrestling Podcast. Shout out to you, man, for joining the show. Jabari, Circle of Debate, and Get Your Podcast. Antoine, CT Flair, of course, in the chat. Haven't seen our guy G Circus this week. Hopefully, probably because we've been going for a while, but we are back going down the stretch of WrestleMania. On the road to WrestleMania. We will be back next week talking a little bit more so about Mania and a lot more other stuff that comes to mind going into next week, because there is a lot of good content. There's a lot of good wrestling. There's a lot of good, things coming around. Is it perfect? No, but it is still entertaining for us to enjoy and have good conversations with. So, Ty, it's been a pleasure today, brother.
Meh. No, I'm playing.
It's been a pleasure, man. Obviously, Big E, obviously not with us this week, as well as BK Matt. Hope to get those guys back soon on the future episodes of the broadcast. That's good, man. It's been episode 1. Are we there yet? Please like, share, subscribe on our YouTube page, youtube.com/@TheBackstageBrawl. You can find us on the Facebook at The Backstage Brawl, Twitter, aka X at @Backstage_Brawl, Instagram at The Backstage Brawl. And yeah, man, we back. Thank you guys for tuning in. It said it was supposed to be a packed episode, but we got it done under an hour and a half. So shouts out to us, man. From myself here, Shop Biz Ronnie, aka the People's Champion, Soft Forest. He's still working on it. And we'll get back to doing more of these. So we'll see you guys soon, man. Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll see you next week. Peace.